Hey, greetings, God of Gold here, back again with another video. Now, I remember talking about the Russo-Ukrainian war in one of my previous videos, and, well, I was trying to be careful with everything because, well, because people nowadays, they're so overly sensitive if I say something, or if, let's say, if I make a statement, even though if it's accurate, people might get offended. First of all, I just want to say, if you have thin skin, just go somewhere else, because it's not worth trying to have me review this, but you came here on your own terms, so be warned. And behave, of course. But for those who want information, at least based on what I know so far, now this really won't be much of an update video of the war itself, but it'll be more of an update on certain things and potential tactics that both sides will use, and I will discuss them one by one, fairly and equally. So, keep this in mind. I'm not favoring either side here, okay? So, let's get this started. First things first, in the fronts that we see here, we got the southwest, you got the south, and then you got the eastern fronts. Now, each one has its own name depending on the city and settlement that surrounds it. For example, we got Bakhmut, which we call this the Bakhmut front because it is the largest city in that vicinity. But that is until you reach Konstantinivka or Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, maybe Lyman too. But basically this whole area is, well, Bakhmut is the largest established settlement here that Russia controls at this current time. Now, let's get started talking about tactics here on both sides on what they could do. Firstly, I could see for the Ukrainian side, let's start with them first. They have done their part in trying to land and entrench in Krinky on the other side of the riverbank. However, though it is very urban, there's a lot of forest lines. This could serve well because tree lines tend to be a good natural defense aside from rivers, marshes, or mountains. Lakes too, like large bodies of water, serve as a good defense mechanism. If you let's say you lead an army and you are not interested in the whole meticulous buildup. So yeah. Now, for Ukraine's tactic here, I would say they have landed on the southern shore, but they have not been able to advance much either. Now, I don't care what reports say because there's a lot of bias out there, so I'm going to try to do this as fairly as I can. So, Ukraine currently, yes, they have a foothold. Have they been able to advance? Well, as far as we know, no. They have not been able to in the past couple weeks. The only time that they did advance was touching down in the city, somewhere either, I think in this area. They did advance a little bit here since then, but in the past couple weeks, there have been absolutely little to no changes on the front whatsoever. Same with over here. Although they did capture the solar panel area, which is really, it doesn't serve a lot of defensive cover. It's just plains, it seems, and it's very, it's adjacent to the shoreline. So this area, to be honest, isn't a good foothold, at least in my opinion, because there is no defense. Yes, you may have trees, you may have bodies of water patches scattered across. That's good, but say for example down here, this won't work. If Russia gets the upper hand, they could easily flood into this area, which they are trying to stabilize the front at this given time. I'm not going to go too far into other details, but as far as I know, in terms of Ukraine's strategy, as far as we've seen, I'm going to safely say that Ukraine's tactic is obviously to harass the Russian position, which on their side is really good. At least that's what they're trying to do, to a degree. Now, if I was Ukraine, if I was leading Ukraine, and I'm going to do this a lot during this video, so just bear with me, okay? So, if I was Ukraine and this landing was there, now they originally wanted to either take one of the settlements, or perhaps what they could have done is do a secret landing on the land, now like over here, but the problem with this is they would have to cross another riverbank. Doing so would be next to suicide. So, what I could see happen, if I was Ukraine in this situation, I would probably hit like corners here, like the intersections on either side, because strategically speaking, if you're on a corner, you have a wider range of view compared to that of like a narrow road. Kind of similar to mountains and canyons, of how your field of view could be limited, which I think also happens on the Eastern Front, but I'll get to that. This might be a couple parts. So basically, if I was in Ukraine's shoes right now and I wanted to somehow wrestle the position of Kozachi, the best target that I can possibly think of is, if they did land, they would have to be very sneaky about it, or they can go right through this riverbank and just deploy in those strategic spots. So obviously attacking from here probably would result in casualties, but if, let's say, Ukraine was willing enough to establish trench line positions somewhere in here, or maybe not trench line, but some kind of position here that serve as like an encampment, and send 2 major battalions of speedboats and try to hit these corners, these intersections, as best as possible, because the more they do it, not only they would literally pinch the central parts of the left side of the city, but they would also be able to have a wider range of control in terms of this, and they could possibly capture this portion within perhaps a couple to a few days. That's Ukraine's. That would be probably my first Ukraine tactic. My next tactic probably would have been to secure areas that are either abandoned. Perhaps they could serve as better cover, especially more so from this area. So the best way to get cover is, there is a building over here which could house something, but keep in mind it is pretty much in the middle of nowhere. So I think the best bet for them to take initiative is take another battalion of speedboats and strike right about here, going from this settlement over near Mykolaiv and Sadove. Once that's done, they could probably do the same similar tactic like they did over here, just trying to expand the zone of control. That would be technically a third or fourth landing. And then they could probably do a merged attack on here and capture these buildings right here, which can serve as some kind of cover for a brief period. It wouldn't be permanent though, because by the time they take it though, Russia could start sending forces immediately to try to block it, which is a possibility. Now, as far as I know, there are a bunch of different areas. I won't be able to go through all of them, so keep in mind of that. Now, since I talked a little about Ukraine's tactics, let me talk about Russia's tactics on here. Now, Russia is trying to create buffer zones, it seems. They're trying to stabilize what already has landed. They don't want this to expand any further past a certain point. Otherwise, areas such as, Crimea or Melitopol could be in serious danger because they would have access to such highways. Keep in mind though, just because they would have access to roads like this does not mean that they would automatically get there. It's a strategic flow of things. Like it's a very crucial point in terms of trying to defend it at all cost. And since the start of the war, or at least since the start of the 2022 invasion, Russia has not only seized control over this, as well as Kherson at the time, but they did set up huge fortifications across this riverbank, knowing that if they lose Kherson, this area would be next. And it seems like the formula kind of follows suit as to who does what. Now, if I was in Russia's shoes right now, and before you say anything, like I said at the beginning of the video, that disclaimer. So this is purely of speculation. This does not mean it will happen, so please do not hold me to it. Now, if, let's say, Russia, they're trying to they stabilized this front line. Nothing has changed. Nobody has advanced. But keep in mind, Russian artillery is striking Ukrainian forces scattered across the area, including directly in parts of the city. Sometimes they hit them off over here. But the point is, like, before they can even land, because this is a huge waterway, they could try to go over towards here and create another landing. But the issue with doing such landing is very dangerous, because they would probably get spotted, even if this would be under Ukrainian control at the given time. It seems that they, aside from Ukrainians trying to hold out, Russia wants nothing but to not only stabilize the front, but when they get the chance to cut off their supply entirely from one of them or both of them, because right around here is the landing point, and next to the circle, this could serve as a huge checkpoint for the Ukrainians. So attacking them across this area is a wise choice. But Krinky, in terms of Russian counterattacks, what they probably should do is, while keeping them busy, they should send battalions to land on some of these marshes, so that this way they would probably gain some kind of footing over riverbanks like this. This would help prevent them from getting through. They would be able to spot them in time, and then that would prevent a second landing on Krinky, or possibly nearby areas. Now, doing so, once their supply is cut off from both sides, which I would think that Russian artillery would start pounding in certain areas, strategic areas, to avoid Ukrainians from doing any further landing points here, perhaps by destroying vital infrastructure. But basically, in time, though, it wouldn't happen right away, but once Ukraine loses their supply routes or reinforcement routes going in through the marshes, this whole entire landing would be a bust, basically. So that's kind of the situation that's going on right there. Now let's quickly talk about this area. Now, like I said before, when I was talking about the Ukrainian side of tactics of trying to merge or do another landing, this is the opposite. Russia, once again, stabilized this front, but I don't think they want to let the Ukrainians go any further because, according to the map, the highway is right down here, south of Krinky and Kozachi and Pidzstepne. So, again, not much cover here. It's just solar panels along this area. They don't serve much good defense, especially if it was like a drone or a tank. This area would be very vulnerable, even if it has all these structures, and it might temporarily conceal someone. Once they're spotted, they just, damage could happen across this area and such. So, if I was in Russia's shoes for this situation, same thing. Start tightening grips along the marshlands, perhaps along near this road, not quite directly at them just yet, just to keep safe from casualties, but basically advance to the point where they would control pretty much up to here. But then before they can do any serious attacks, I would say a Marine group would, with the support of artillery pounding the Ukrainians, they could probably just so they would probably just hit this road going from here. Now, not only this area is a crucial point in reinforcements, but like I said earlier, they've got supply routes. They can send groups along that riverbank. So if Russia is to ever kill this pocket, it's actually a little easier than Krinky. All they would need to do is secure the marshes as much as they can. Then once that's done, their supply starts to drain. That's when you do the next final blow, take them out, and then before they can reinforce, you would probably have control up towards here for the most part. That would throw them off, and that would really hinder any future efforts of a land invasion on that sector again. But after that, I would probably just build trenches either right in front of it, next to it, or perhaps emergency trenches directly in front, depending on how in-depth it is. So yeah. Now, I discussed two things. Now, I understand there's going to be more areas, such as the Dachi area, which has gotten a lot of things over time, or the Ostriv 2 area, near Kherson, of course, but I can't go over all of them, so please excuse it, but those are, I guess, the starts of the tactics. Now, as for Robotny, I would say for both sides, Ukraine is trying to expand their zone of control. Simply, I think some days ago, they started attacking along certain tree lines, and they captured these areas recently, within the last week alone. But it didn't come without a cost. Casualties were pretty steep, I would have to say. Unfortunately, I don't have the numbers on me, but according to many reports, every time one side attacks, doesn't matter if it's Russian or Ukrainian, that side is more likely to take casualties. It's the science of warfare, pretty much, which is pretty basic. Now, Russia is also trying to do a lot of things on their own, but that didn't work out. Neither side currently has made further gains since what Ukraine did. So obviously you know about Ukraine's tactic of expanding zone of control, which is a good choice. I don't think this would have much to change, at least for me here, because if you expand your zone of control, you can get yourself out of a fire pit, and you can stop getting shot at so many times in one concentrated area. Keep in mind, it's a pot, like a cauldron. So I guess that's why they call it the cauldron maneuver for flexible warfare. Now, if I was in Russia's shoes, however, my best bet would probably be to round up a combination of units spanning from either Verbove, having a little bit of lag, Nova Fedorivka, Pevlisky, and Nova Pokrovka, pretty much Nova Kurlivka, pretty much these 5 settlements. Now, they are trying to defend Verbove as much as they can, and so far they've done a good job doing so, and they stalled Ukraine's further advance, or counteroffensive, as you will. Now, if I was in Russia's shoes, these 5 settlements would be rounded up with not only a couple of tank divisions for each segment, but I would say a few each, possibly 3 to 5 or more, motorized infantry, which would carry other infantry to be deployed. And the best bet would probably be to just not even think about it and just spearhead as fast as they can across this highway. But of course, I would say doing it at nighttime would be the best choice, because if you are out in the open like that, then you'll get shot at, and it's that would not work for them. That would be a disaster for the Russians if they did it during the daytime, because it limits visibility on both sides. Now, let's say they got up to this point, but the idea is to go as far and fast as possible along this road. Doing so will make it more likely that they could reach this road junction, this intersection right here, which, like I said, intersections are very useful in cutting off certain things. So, for example, while Russia holds as many lines as they can across this front, I would say do another distraction. But then, as the infantry, as the motorized infantry goes on here, depending on where he picks to stop, have several infantry brigades start deploying, with, of course, the aid of other infantry groups, if possible, to try and push the newly Ukrainian advances over here back. This would put Robotny in a very tight spot, because, like I said, encircling is probably the best tactic for any country, not just Russia, to use. This whole area could fall under their control if this plan was to ever be pulled off. But even if, let's say, Ukraine does a counter attack, they would need to probably dig emergency trench lines to ensure no disaster would occur as such. Now, aside from that, this plan could theoretically work. It would probably send Ukrainian troops to either retreat or just hold. So, what should probably be done here to finish off Robotny before like a surrounded, encircled attack is, well, not only try to recover more ground near Verbove, but also try and secure a pincer maneuver, completely cutting off that road, and if possible, with the aid of further troops, try and capture that intersection. The sooner that intersection is captured, not only they will be right up to the next target, but they would also encircle this area. There would be no supplies going in. Ukrainian forces would be starved. And after they do starve their ammunition, while Russia keeps getting supplies, they would begin a new series of attacks, completely annihilating that entire front and undoing what Ukraine has done in the past months in this attempt at a counteroffense. But obviously, like I said, Ukrainians' tactic, not much to change there, because, well, you're expanding your front, which is very wise, because, you know, it's the cauldron type of thing. Now, I know there's a bunch of different other areas, so I'm going to talk about those at another time, but I think, well, this one too, I'm going to talk about that another time. Basically, I'm going to talk about Bakhmut, and then I'll end it. Now, obviously, you've seen reports everywhere. Russia has committed a large counterattack up here. Ukraine seems to be having manpower issues on that side because they're sending it all near Avdiivka. Because of this gives Russia the opportunity once again to do stuff. Now, not much tactics can change for Russia here to retake what they've lost. But I would say pretty much capture the railways as fast as humanly possible. If you have to ride along them, which could also theoretically help, or advance near, like, behind them, that would also, let's say, Russia secures these tree lines going into here. That would mean that this whole area would be surrounded, but they would also be able to attack this from multiple directions, causing this entire front line to collapse. And all that will be left is Klashivka, which obviously trench lines, if we zoom in very quickly, there are trench lines northwest of the settlement, which serve as a prime thing because this is on a higher elevation, at least according from what I remember. But after, let's say, Russia manages to get a hold of these rail lines again, completely under their control once more. Now, it seems that they're trying to re-enter Klashivka. That is a good method on their part. Ukraine, however, since there's lack of manpower, although I would probably say if I was in Ukraine's situation, just send more manpower and try to push past the railways, more specifically in the direction of Bakhmut, but also to ensure that this field and these forests are secured. Don't worry about the south, because that city is pretty much, well, that village down there is destroyed. But basically, once there's like aggressive attacks enough, then Ukraine could probably recapture this area. And after that, let's say they manage to recapture some of the settlements nearby, including the railways. That would mean that they could still use the force to their advantage, but with the help of other Bakhmut fighters, they could try to advance further. But keep in mind, Russia will not take kindly to their advance. But if this was to be pulled off, I would say Ukraine could recover a lot more if they fix their manpower issue. I might go a little more in depth with this. If you guys want to, comment down below. If you want me to put a little more details, I'll try my best to research. But keep in mind, I won't update this frequently because, well, fog of war is a big issue, meaning that lack of information, but there's also a bunch of misinformation on both sides. So you always got to be careful with reports like that, you know? So basically, once, let's say, Russia captures or recaptures all this lost ground from the Ukrainians, their next best bet would probably need to be help the Russians over in Bakhmut and former Wagner group operatives to push the remaining groups out of Bakhmut, like pretty much the rest of the city, as much as they can. These are the outskirts. The inskirts, I guess you could say, of the city are well under their control, but the outskirts are still a little shaky. So I would say once Russia, let's say, captures at least this much, then Bakhmut would pretty much be 100% under their control. Not counting Kromov, by the way. Kromov is not part of Bakhmut, in case you're wondering, which also reminds me, bring this to the end of the video. I will safely say not much tactic change I would do here, but basically same thing, is try to advance as far and fast as humanly possible to this road system. Like, you would also advance here, but you would also stop right at the edge and hold your ground because, well, you don't know how many Ukrainian troops could be in there. But I would safely say that if Russia does this tactic again, I think they could possibly take Kromov, and combining their other advances that I mentioned, they could really put Ivanivsky and Vodanivka in serious trouble after several means of advance. Now, aside from that, now keep in mind, all those military tactics are strictly speculation, or at least what I would think that they would do. Now, will they do it? Probably not. But who knows? No tactic here is off the table. It doesn't matter who advances, something is bound to happen. Now, obviously, I'm aware of the missile strikes, but obviously this is a pretty tough situation, which is why I rarely talk about it, because, well, people will start pushing cancel culture on me or something. They'll, report me telling me I'm promoting war, which in actuality I'm not. This is strictly speculation or my predictions so far. Now, if you want a part 2, please comment down below, and if I get a bunch of comments and enough views for this, I might do a part 2 where I talk about the rest of the Dnipro front, the Bridgehead front down here in eastern Zaporizhia and western Donetsk. Or I could also talk about this front a little bit. It's up to you. So, thank you for listening. I hope I've given you as much of my theories as possible. Now, doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it's fun to think sometimes. But still, stay safe out there, and we will just have to wait and see. So take care. God of Gold is out.